Brock Bowers just had the greatest season ever for a rookie tight end, but Tyler Warren could end up having an even better season in 2025. Here's why. Tyler Warren had an unreal season this year for Penn State, an important part for their success. Ryan, why is there a possibility that this guy could go on to be a top 10 pick?
You just don't often get 6'6", 260-pound tight ends that can run routes, that were as productive as he was. And also, by the way, the second half of the year, he showed massive improvements as a blocker, where now I have a high upside of him being an all-around tight end. He was a pure receiving tight end early in the season, but by the end of the year, he was a well-rounded offensive weapon for the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yeah, he shows so much athleticism for a tight end, and it's really funny to put into context what he was like last year before Andy Kotelnicki showed up, where he was the second tight end to Theo Johnson. He wasn't really getting utilized as a primary target in the offense, and then Andy Kotelnicki shows up and he goes, "Hey man, this is the most athletic dude on our team. Why aren't we using him to literally do everything?" And then suddenly he bursts and explodes into this multi-use weapon. I don't think there's going to be a direct translation to him being used as a quarterback, as a center, as a read option guy, like all the crazy ways that they used him at Penn State. But we see how his traits are going to translate to him being a dump off option, a threat over the middle of the field. All of those tools are exactly what you look for in a super productive tight end in the NFL.
First and foremost, the frame translates, right? But then you see him move around. Like, I remember watching him in the Penn State game, Joe, and in the Notre Dame game, and Notre Dame had a great defense, right? Like, they were really strong in the second and third level, but this kid just looked like he was running at a different speed than all the linebackers on the field and all the safeties on the field at certain points, right? So this is one of those kids that we kind of talk about the mismatch weapon conversation, right? And while you are correct, this isn't going to be a guy that's going to be snapping the football and then go mossing dudes down the field. Like, that's just not most likely a strategic way that you're going to utilize Tyler Warren on the NFL level. It's more of a fun, cutesy way in the college game. But the fact of the matter is that he was able to do that because he's so athletic, right? Like, we just don't see 260-pound guys move the way Tyler Warren can do and be as versatile and alignment perspective as what Tyler Warren was able to use at. He was a little bit of a moving chess piece for one of the an offense that desperately needed his impact on a week-to-week basis.
If we had to identify any weaknesses, because he's not a perfect prospect, I think that him being thrown into being such a focal point of the offense, there were still a lot of things that needed to be refined because it was just such a rapid progression of going from being the second tight end to now the go-to guy for Penn State. What weaknesses do you think stand out for Warren?
I don't think he's a great route runner. I think because he's 260 pounds, right? Like, he's not going to break it off the way the guys that are like 240-something pound tight ends or more of a movement-based guy, like a Colston Loveland, for instance. Like, he's just not going to be the same type of route runner. But it doesn't worry me as much because he's 260 pounds, so he can fight through tighter windows if his route breaks aren't super clean. But the other thing, Joe, and we saw this more in 2023 than 2024, so I'm not super worried about it, but I do think that he can time contested catches a little bit better. I think there were some times where maybe he just leaped a little bit too early or didn't locate the football perfectly in the air. But when he's in the air, he generally is a really good contested catch player. But I do think that he can just locate the football a little bit better. And then that route running upside, I think he can be a solid route runner on the next level, but I don't think that that's necessarily where he's going to hang his hat in the NFL.
You also mentioned like the blocking was showing signs of improvement. I thought that was like the biggest question mark for me. I don't think that he immediately needs to come in, put his hand in the dirt, and be like this super impactful blocker, but thought the pad level, the leg drive was super inconsistent. It's definitely one of the weaker parts of his game. At least he shows some intent. That is something that we always try to check when we're looking at a tight end. Like, hey, does this guy at least want to hit people? Then we can coach him up on his technique, because the pro game is a lot different than what you're going to be doing in college in terms of what you're asked to do as a blocker. Talking about Tyler Warren's background as a recruit and how he got here, I mentioned that he was the second tight end to Theo Johnson in 2023. Coming into Penn State, he wasn't even one of the more premier tight end recruits, and they have a history of bringing in some huge names, some former 5-stars that have gone on to be super productive in the NFL. He was a 3-star guy coming out of Mechanicsville in Virginia. What else can we tell our listeners about Tyler Warren?
Yeah, and Atlee High School, like you mentioned, in Mechanicsville, Virginia. Obviously, Virginia to Penn State has been a nice pipeline for the Nittany Lions over the years. They've made a big living of keeping kids in the state of Pennsylvania, but also going down and dipping into the talent pool in Virginia. And he's one of the latest ones, obviously, in the 2020 recruiting class. Like you mentioned, Joe, only a 3-star player. He was listed as the 543rd overall player in the 2020 class on the 247 composite ranking. So he wasn't this massive recruit. But interesting enough, although he didn't have this huge star rating, his offer list wasn't huge, but it was pretty good, right? Like Penn State, he had Louisville, he had Michigan, he had South Carolina, Syracuse, and Virginia. But the interesting part is that it was a little bit of projection because Tyler Warren was a high school tight end. So this was a 6'6", 235-pound athlete coming out of high school that needed to develop his frame into a tight end. And we often say, like, why is he running Wildcat quarterbacks? Because he was literally a high school quarterback for the majority of his career. So he was a developmental guy that has grown into another part of the proud tradition of tight end play at Penn State. Like they've had a nice string of really talented tight ends in the past, like a Pat Fryermuth, like Kyle Brady. They've developed some good ones over the years. And Tyler Warren, I think, has an argument as maybe the best Penn State tight end in the recent history. Like he is developed into that type of player.
Which is really crazy to consider all that. And it makes sense because he had such a productive season this year. It was almost the extreme of getting to showcase what he can be and who he is as a player. Almost never, I was going to say very rarely, but almost never we see a tight end that gets focused on this much as Tyler Warren was for Penn State this past season. The pro comp that we have for Tyler Warren, I love because the hair comparisons there. Hopefully the demeanor and the personality is not, I don't think it is, but we're going with Jeremy Shockey, the former Saints and Giants tight end who was very athletic, was a demon with the ball in his hands. Why else are we going with Jeremy Shockey here as the pro comp?
I can't believe you introduced Jeremy Shockey and you let off with the New Orleans Saints version of Jeremy Shockey. He's the New York Giants version.
Well, he was good with both teams.
Oh, he was a lot better with the Giants, Joe. He's a lot better with the Giants.
Obviously.
The comparison comes from big, physically dense tight ends. They can be seam runners. They can move with the ball after the catch. But the part about Jeremy Shockey that I used to love personally as an observer was he used to drag dudes for extra yardage, and then he would get up and he would kind of have that evil look in his eye a little bit, right? And he would kind of point that like, hey, dude, I just drug you like 5 or 6 yards. This is a strong, physically well put together. I think one of the most underrated parts about Tyler Warren's game is his after catch ability, similarly to how Jeremy Shockey won in the NFL when he was healthy and when he was at his best version of himself.
Folks, let us know in the comments. Let us know where you want to see Tyler Warren play in the NFL. Hit that like button and subscribe, and we will talk to you later.